welcome to the 39th episode of Redeeming the Time. I am your host, Jacob Wells. This is my dad, my co-host, Keith Eric Wells. Thank you for joining us. If you want to contact the show, you can email us at redeemingthetimepod@gmail.com.
Get that down pretty good now. Only took 39 tries, right?
Yeah, for real. I say it in my dreams.
All right. Today we hit
9 books.
Crazy. Yeah, the minor prophets go by pretty quick. So.
Yeah, a lot of them are like 3 chapters long, so it's...
Yeah, or one.
Or one. Obadiah does not have chapters.
Yeah. Obadiah.
A chapter.
All right.
But before that, let's talk about something that
What should we talk about? I don't know.
What should we talk about? What do you want to talk about? Knife? Love? No, let's talk about board games. It's a big piece of...
Life, love, board games. Why not?
I like board games. I like games.
Yes, you do.
I can control myself now.
You and your wife like board games.
When I was younger, I would get really mad.
Because you lost.
You never let me win in checkers?
If you won, you won.
Yeah. That's probably why I'm so competitive, though.
Wasn't just going to give it to you.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
Uh-huh. All right. So you're looking for a favorite board. You probably like some weird board game nobody's ever even heard of. There's a guy here at the homeschool co-op that designs games.
Yep.
Like on the side. I mean, that's not his full-time job, I believe.
I have 2 of them now. I haven't played them yet. But
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. One of them you can only get in Europe, but he got me one of them, which is pretty cool.
Okay. All right, so what are we doing here? Top 3? What do we... favorite?
Just whatever comes to your mind. First one that comes to my mind is Catan, when I was or Catan, however you want to say it. In high school, my buddies and I played it way too much, and now I don't want to play it anymore because we played it way too much.
Yeah, Brent's big into that game, too.
Yeah. Brent, he's good, too.
It's a strategy game. You've got to get resources. You got to block people. You've got to try to get...
You have to barter, so you can't be just a jerk, because then you won't trade with them. So, it's a good game.
All right.
So, like Camel Up.
Yeah, Camel Up's really cool.
It's camel racing. There's these little camels that you place wagers on who you think is going to be in first after each round, and then you accumulate points.
Yeah, whoever has the most points at the end of the game wins. Oh, man. What kind of... I like just simple games. Growing up, I loved Stratego, Monopoly, Parcheesi, all the normal...
All right, come on. It's not a board game. What is your favorite game?
That's not a board game?
No, the game that I'm thinking of that you enjoy so much, but it's not actually on a board.
Oh, I don't know. What?
You played in Brazil.
Oh, dominoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the dominoes is awesome.
Yeah.
Real dominoes, not like whatever that train thing's called.
Mexican train, I think.
Yeah, Mexican train. That's fun, I guess, but real dominoes is fun. Yeah, it's I play it on my phone. I've got it where I play against random people, and
what about card games?
Card games, the best card game ever is euchre.
We just fist bumped for those of you who are listening.
If you grew up in Indiana, like, you have to know how to play euchre. It's like every pause in high school, they're pulling out euchre deck and stuff. Now, growing up, I mean, we were allowed in our house, but Grandma, you couldn't even have a deck of cards in her house. I mean, it was associated with gambling, so you just didn't do it. But that now it's just games that you play just like any other game. But that's.
I've gotten into.
You were saying board games, so I wasn't even thinking that way.
Yeah, I just expanded it because I know you're more like card games.
Yeah, I prefer that. And what was the
Hearts is fun.
That one you introduced us to, that 5 Crowns.
5 Crowns is good.
Man, that's a lot of fun. Yeah, for a big group of people that you don't really have to, not a tremendous amount of thinking, and you can talk. Like euchre.
You can't talk.
You can talk a little bit, but
you can talk while you're dealing, and then it's all.
And your partner gets messed up, or you get messed up, and then, that kind of thing. So what?
My roommate and I were. He's my euchre partner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we were.
Jordan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were on the same page. we played so much together.
Yeah, yeah. The guy you want to play euchre with
Rick
is Rick Blankenship. He is a hoot. He'll call stuff up without even
Bill.
looking.
No
Yeah.
peek picker upper.
No, yep. They're a lot of fun. They just do it to make other people's heads explode. So it's a lot of fun. So I don't know, what's your favorite game? My mom liked Rook growing up. That was I've never played Rook. I never learned how.
I've been playing that.
Not very many people play that anymore.
I'm-
Can't even find the decks. You'd have to probably look that up to find it.
I'm not good at it.
Uh,
It's completely different than.
I've-
I don't know when to throw points and not throw points.
Yeah, the game years ago when you were a kid was Hand and Foot. We've played that with Bill and Barb and the Blankenships before, and it's just a long game. That's the one. It just takes a really long time, so that's why I typically don't play that one. I want something that's fun and quick.
You know what the best thing about is euchre is? It's fast.
It's a fast game. Yes. Thank you, Jim. All right. So, all right. Well, tell us what game's yours. That was
no organization at all.
yeah.
but
There's not much structure there.
It's all right.
You can tell we really talked through some of these ahead of time. But well, you do. I mean, you play board games all the time. What was that other one? Some Aztec or what was the name of that? The marbles, the blue marbles, and
Azul.
Azul.
Yeah, Azul's a great game.
Aztec. I knew the
I
AZ.
had no idea where you were going.
Azul. Yeah.
There's some good ones out there. There's the Seven Wonders. I could go on, but
All right.
yeah, there's some good ones out there.
Yeah. If you ever want to know if a game's good, ask him or Callie. They collect them. They've got them all.
Not all.
Yeah, Mafia and stuff like that.
Well, their cousin's really big into it.
Yeah.
Joe.
All right, let's get started. We were in Amos. We got about halfway through Amos, and we're going to kick back in Amos 6. And what's Monday?
Is the end of Amos.
Oh, the whole book. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, yeah, we got Amos here, and
So we get this farmer.
I want to first
Prophet,
apologize.
yeah.
I didn't get that chart on there. It didn't look good on the video, so
okay.
I tried to get it. It didn't work, so I apologize for not
So
getting
Google
that
it?
chart. Yeah, it's on there.
All right.
I just couldn't get it to look good. So
Okay. All right. So we've got this farmer prophet that God's called, and he gets him chapter 6. Woe to them that are at ease in Zion. It's a pretty famous phrase out of Amos. These people had become very prideful, indulgent in their blessings. We see many times when blessings come, it becomes really easy to keep our eyes off the Lord.
yeah,
Proverbs. I think I mentioned this sermon a couple of weeks ago. Where the writer says, don't give me too much, don't give me too little, else I'll take my eyes off you, or I'll curse. Those types of things. So
I bore the pride of Jacob.
yeah.
And they're talking about the leadership. You've turned judgment into gall, and fruit of righteousness into hemlock.
Yeah. So he talks about how he's going to humble them in 3 through 7, and then the end of the chapter talks about Israel's destruction with Assyria. Well, it will be Assyria, and that's what he's talking about. Then he gets
Chapter 7 is a chapter of the 3 visions here.
Yeah.
First, we have the locusts who come and eat the field, but the key part is when they came to eat the harvest. It was at the end of harvest. It is after the king's taxes. So after this locust, the Israelites will truly have nothing.
Yeah.
So
now there's 2 interesting things that happen. Well, I guess 3 actually. The first time this comes about, Amos prays, and God turns. Are you going to do this? Please, God, don't do this. He intercedes for them, and it doesn't happen. Then the second vision happens of a
consuming fire.
Yeah, fire consuming the land. Amos prays again, and God turns. Then we get the vision of the plumb line.
Just a measurement, a height measurement. Yeah. Or no, it's a straightness.
Straight. So gravity, you take a plumb line, it's got a weight at the bottom of it. It's always straight, and you put that along a wall, and you can determine if that wall that you're building is straight. well, he's making the comparison. He's going to put this against God's plumb line of righteousness against who they are as people. And, this Israel wasn't meeting God's standard. He intercedes for him again, and this time God does not listen here. And it's interesting. Did you notice calls them Isaac that time instead of Israel? I thought that was interesting. Doesn't attach them to no one ever does that. It's either Abraham or Israel or Jacob. Never Isaac. But I'm sure there's some interesting things there, but I'll let you look at that.
So Amaziah the priest hears of this, and in the worldly sense again, it's during the time of Jeroboam. So prosperity.
Jeroboam the second, yeah.
Prosperity and everything. So Amaziah the priest hears of Amos's prophecy, these visions, and he tells him to get out of here.
Yeah, be quiet, man. What are you doing?
We don't want you here anymore. And this is the king's sanctuary, his spot, his city.
He even throws some shade on him, like, you're not a prophet. Why would you? And that he responds, I'm not a prophet. You're right, but God brought me out to do this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be faithful.
Yeah.
And
just shows how completely lost they were, how they completely lost sight of where they were and why they were there.
And then the Lord answers for Amos. He curses Amaziah and confirms what Amos has been saying about Israel's demise. All right.
Chapter 8.
The summer fruit.
Yes. God asked Amos here what he sees. So who was that again that he asked that? Was it Ezekiel? What do you see here? Well, he does the same thing with Amos, and it's a basket of summer fruit.
Yeah, it's the same vision almost.
Yeah. So
summer fruit is, it's ripe already. It's meaning it's not going to last long. That fruit that's sitting on your counter that you got, it's not going to last. By next week it's going to be bad. Apparently, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but apparently the Hebrew word for summer and end are very similar words, so there's a little bit of a play on the words going on there. And he tells them their sin of dishonesty and cheating the poor in verses 4 through 6. God sees us all. He sees the person that's surviving in the slums to the people in the mansions.
Yeah.
And he sees their sin here, and their judgment is coming. It will be like the mourning of a son, the loss of a child. So if you can imagine the deep lamentation that comes with that.
Yeah, it's gruesome.
You're going to have 11 through 14. You're going to have a famine, not famine of food. You're going to have a famine of hearing God's word.
There will come.
Go ahead.
Basically, I read that as there will come a point where he will stop sending messengers.
Right.
And you see that during, toward the end, there's not people in each.
Right, and they're going to wander around, and they're going to look for. It's going to lead toward idolatry and all that, more idolatry. And so, all right, number 9, Amos 9, the last chapter.
There's no escape.
No. Yeah, this is pretty much right there. No matter what they do, God's judgment's coming. He's going to use all the other nations to bring it. And then he leaves with a good word, 11 through 15, God's restoration on Israel, prophetic in the Messiah, and those types of things. All right? So that's Monday, right?
That's Amos. Yes, it is Monday. Now we got Tuesday, and we got 2 books here. And we got Obadiah.
Where the wind
So that was famous Amos. This is Obadiah. That's how I remembered.
Okay.
I just... as a kid in Awana, I would have to come up with sing the song and famous Amos and then Obadiah. And Jonah, Micah, Nahum.
I go to Oklahoma from the musical. Okay. All right. So when was Obadiah written? This is no one really knows, but
I don't know. I think it's he lived in the Southern Kingdom.
Right.
But I don't really know when it was written.
All right. So
what do you think?
So there's 13 different Obadiahs in in the Old Testament. Verses 1 through 9 are very similar to Jeremiah 49, 7 through 22. So Jeremiah is most likely quoting Obadiah when he does that. So we know it's not during the time of Obadiah, which eliminates one of them. It's written to
Edom,
the judgment to Edom. Obadiah it means worshiper or servant of Yahweh. So the main Obadiahs are this. There's one during King Ahab, the one that meets Elijah and had hidden the prophets from the queen Jezebel. There's that guy in 1 Kings 18. There's the Obadiah that Jehoshaphat sends out in 2 Chronicles 17 to go teach. There's an Obadiah that oversees the temple repairs during King Josiah, 2 Chronicles 34. And there's an Obadiah that's a priest in the time of Nehemiah. So that's after Jeremiah. So that one's already out. So remember the Edomites? They're the descendants
of Esau
down in the south. And when the Israelites were coming up out of Egypt on their way to the promised land, they wouldn't let them go through their land.
Their stubborn enemy.
Yeah. At times they were conquered by Israel and were under tribute. Sometimes they were aligned with them in battle. Sometimes they were aligned with their enemies. So we've got all this. So when does this occur? Verse 1 gives us some clues here. Verses 10 through 14 give us even more. It speaks of an attack on Jerusalem. So they attacked Jerusalem, or were part of an attack on Jerusalem. So we can assume they weren't under tribute at that time, if that was it. So that gives us two times. That gives us either the time of the attack during King Jehoram by the Philistines and the Arabians. So they were part of the Philistines and the Arabians in 2 Chronicles 21, or during the Babylonian attack. Most likely it's during the first one, because the Babylonian attack, the city was completely destroyed. This is talking just about a partial hit on the city. So this is most likely, I said all that to say, this is most likely the Obadiah during the time of King Jehoshaphat that sent him out to teach.
Yep.
All right. So 848, 841 BC. That's probably more than anyone wanted to know.
Obadiah is interesting because it doesn't deal with Israel or Judah, and there's another one
Right.
that does that as well. But
so this puts him probably one of the earliest prophets, maybe a little before Joel. This puts him around the time of Elisha as well. So sent out during Jehoshaphat. All right, so go ahead.
Verses 3 and 4 are the main verses that stuck out to me. And the rest of the chapter, you can see their deeds. You get a list of their crimes they committed, especially against Israel. In Judah, they watched them be in trouble, and they did nothing. They watched. They didn't allow them. They were jerks, basically, to Israel. And but these two verses shows the pride that they had.
Hey, you were talking about this earlier in the week.
Yeah. Okay. Edom was not the biggest country. They were not like Israel. They were not like Babylon or Assyria. Not even like Egypt, Syria, Lebanon. They were not like the Philistines. None of them. Yet, verse 3, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord.
So pride can come into any of us.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So Edom was not like these, and no matter how high or mighty or how low you are, you can still be pride. And
pride can come
they
out.
boasted of their defenses, their wisdom, because of the town Teman, or the city Teman. They were the men of the east that was
wise
talking
men,
about and all that jazz. And
so why?
I don't know.
Why
they
was
set themselves up as the eagle? Come on, I don't know. They had great pride, and so what am I most proud? When am I most proud? When I think I'm really great, but in reality,
I'm proud in any situation. You see people all the time that, obviously we get on we get on the TV and we see, big fish in big ponds. But you can be
Yeah.
a big fish in a really little pond as well and allow that pride to come on in your life.
Like, when you look at Babylon, you look at Assyria, it makes sense. Like, in your human mind, okay, they're great. They're huge. Like, they're a huge nation. If they're proud, that makes sense because they've taken over. A small little country, that doesn't make sense. But that is a picture of us. Like, when you really are the most proud is when you're really standing on the most unsolid ground.
All right.
For me.
That was very good. Verses 10 through 14, why their judgment is coming, how they had treated Israel. The Abrahamic covenant is true. They lifted up against them. They didn't help them when they were in trouble. And verses 17 through 20, they're going to be consumed. Israel will be the fire. Edom will be the stubble. And this occurs a couple times. This occurs through Babylon. Eventually, the second time when Rome comes through, so we're talking hundreds of years after that, when Rome comes through in 66 through 70 AD, Edom's destroyed forever at this point. They never return. To this point, they're not back. It's the country of Jordan now. And that area is barren. So, talks about verse 21, the saviors, deliverers will be with Judah. Edom's land will be ruled by the Lord. That's what it's talking about. All right. Moving on.
Jonah was a prophet.
Ooh.
All right.
Never really got it.
We know this account.
Sad but true.
Jonah is...
If you've never seen Jonah Veggie Tales, it's a full-length movie. Every little kid, every kid, meaning anyone that is breathing, should watch it. It bankrupted their company just because it was such a big undertaking, but it is well done.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. So
you need to watch it.
Yeah.
But
so we get Jonah.
Jonah is in Joppa.
Yeah, this is a pretty familiar account for most people, but
I'm gonna go through it. Let's go.
Let's do it. Okay, so let me ask you a question.
All right.
So what if you were asked to go to your greatest enemy to preach something, knowing if they repented, they could and probably would destroy your nation?
I would say no. Or my human...
Right.
I would say no. Yeah.
That's the situation of Jonah.
Yeah. So Nineveh, we'll go. So he's called to go to Nineveh, which is their... And they're the fish slappers.
No, they're not.
That's what it is in the movie.
That's in the movie.
All right. But really, they were not a
Nineveh is the capital of
Assyria.
The Assyrian Empire.
This was not a desirable city to go to. It was very evil. You get a very
evil folks.
You get a glimpse of this in the end of chapter 1, I think. Mm-hmm. So, like you said, we would say no. Like if you're So Jonah decides to run from God, and he's on his way to Tarshish, which is the other side of the world at this point. Yeah. Like 2,500 miles away from Joppa.
So let me set up first who this guy is, all right?
Jonah?
Yeah, so Jonah's a prophet. Jonah was a prophet. He's a prophet in the north in Israel, once again during Jeroboam II. 2 Kings 14:25. He is most likely an admired prophet. There was some stuff going on with the Assyrian Empire. They had 3 campaigns that took them away from Israel for a while. Jonah had prophesied that Israel would regain some of their land, and sure enough, it happens. So they're getting territory back. Man, you're the guy, Jonah. Thanks for letting us know. This is awesome. So this is the situation. He's in Assyria had this situation under Jeroboam II, and now God says, "Hey Jonah, I want you to go to Nineveh." Verse 3, but Jonah decides to go somewhere else. He decides to go to Tarshish.
That's a funny scene in VeggieTales when he decides to go to Tarshish because it's on there's a board with the map, and it's on the back end of the board.
Yeah.
So that's how far it was. That's how they depicted that. So he buys his way on a ship to go to Tarshish, and God sends a storm.
Yeah.
And the mariners are scared. Jonah is asleep. Which that's a...
You're jumping ahead quick, man. Go ahead.
What?
There's just a lot of good stuff in here. This first chapter is awesome. So, yeah. So Jonah decides to do that. The whole thought here is like, how could God possibly love these people? Look at what they've done. I mean, their culture, their appearance, their features, any of that stuff. The only reason I stopped you there, because this put me down a rabbit hole this week. It reminded me of something I had read. Ken Ham has a book called One Blood, and in that he shows us, we see people across the world, or we see somebody very different than us physically or whatever, and there's a racism, there's a hatred that can many times brew up. And in that book, he shows us scientifically that the so-called, if you take two people anywhere in the world, all right, say someone from China, someone from Alaska, I mean, pretty far apart, all right? Well, it's not as far apart. Okay, whatever. You take two people anywhere in the world. The difference genetically between those people, how much do you think?
It's like 0.005, right, or something
It's
like
0.2%.
Okay.
But they're like the outward, so that's just genetically of their whole body. You were closer on. The facial, the outward appearance things, the difference between those two people is 6% of that 0.2. So 0.012% is the difference between any two people in the world, what they look like on the outside versus, I'm talking ethnicity, I'm talking, features, colors, all that kind of stuff.
And that's what brings us the most divide, that little...
Yeah. So Jonah, he's putting his desire or his hatred above what God's told him to do.
Yeah.
And, it's real easy to say, it's real easy to say when we're following God, when he tells us not to steal and not to do these types of things, oh, I can do that. That's no problem. But it's much harder when he says, go and do this.
Go and love your enemies.
Yeah. And saying no to God is just as much a sin as committing one of those things. I can get out and preach good news messages all the time. Preaching what God puts on your heart, that's a much harder message. Those aren't quite as easy.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
you're good.
So he goes down to Joppa. He goes down into the boat. He goes down into the sides of the ship, right? Down. Yeah, that's.
But he's asleep, which then brings my little side thing, is how comfortable he was in his decision of sin.
Mm-hmm.
He's in this boat and he's sleeping in.
That's
his
amazing to me.
Yeah. So there. Yeah, that's where I went.
Yeah.
And so then, this is a great scene in the movie as well. But they're scared. They're throwing stuff out of the ship. Jonah tells the mariners who he is, and
It terrifies them.
They knew exactly what was happening
Yeah.
when he told them, and they knew that it was because his God was angry at him, and and that is so he decides that
He gives them the solution. Yeah.
he says, "It's me. Throw me off the boat," and he gets swallowed up by a whale.
So stop at that for a second. He is more willing to die. He doesn't know that whale's going to be there.
Yeah.
He is more willing to jump off the boat and die than to go to where God has told him to go. And when he dies, who is the first person he is going to see? God, the very one he denied.
Yeah.
It's just I love it. It's just we're not logical when we're running around.
So we're in chapter 2 now.
No. Let's finish
one.
up. Yeah. I'm not gonna let you go on that. So now I want you to compare verse 6 and verse 14 of the. I'm gonna spend more time in this chapter than anywhere else. I promise. Of the sailors. In verse 6, they call him God, the God of creation. In 14, they're calling him, these are the sailors, they're calling him Lord. All right? There's a difference here. These sailors are never going to be the same. I mean, they see what's going on here. So the Lord prepared,
You see that in the movie as well.
Yeah. The Lord prepares a great fish, it calls us here. Jesus calls it a whale in Matthew chapter 12. I'm going with Jesus. He knows it. All right? People lose their mind over that. I have no idea why. It's just, this doesn't even have to be a miracle. Here I got an account for it. In February of 1891, there was a whaling ship called the Star of the East in the Falkland Islands. They were hunting sperm whale, and the whale hit the ship. Two of the guys went over, and they thought they had died. They thought they had just drowned. They catch this whale. They bring it up, and it says how much longer? The next day, they saw movement in the whale's stomach. They opened it up, and there's this guy, James Bartley, unconscious. One of the two. The other guy did drown. He said he could breathe, but the heat was unbearable, and the gastric juices bleached his skin for the rest of his life. They actually said he was crazy for the first 2 days before his mind finally came back to him. So you say, oh, but it was a miracle. Why would you say that? It doesn't have to be a miracle. It was. I mean, God sent the fish directly to him, but he could have breathed. I mean, whales.
Mammals.
They're mammals. They breathe air. So this is cool.
Yeah.
All right.
And he's in there for 3 days.
Yeah.
And so during this, it's a bit of a time of self-examination.
And then it says, verse 1.
Yeah. He takes a look in the mirror, and while inside the belly of a whale. So for me with that is the question, what does it take for God to get your attention, to get your obedience? And for Jonah, it was getting swallowed up by a whale.
Yeah,
for 3 days in the gastric juices, incredible heat.
Wearsby says, this prayer was not born out of affection, but out of affliction, which is true. He quotes some 9 different psalms, and he finally claims the promise of King Solomon. If we point toward you, you will save us. And he repents, and then the Lord directs the whale to where he needs to go, and he vomits him out.
It's taking everything in me not to sing the song of when Jonah's in the whale.
That's the best scene in the whole movie, actually.
Yes, it is.
It's like a black gospel song with all these angels dancing around.
Go look it
It's
up.
a very large whale, though.
Yes.
I mean, there's a broken ship inside, sort of like Pinocchio, the original Pinocchio. All right.
So then he gets expelled from the whale, where he needs to go, and Jonah then listens to the call to go to Nineveh.
Yeah.
And so
God's gracious, gives him a second chance. Yeah. Well,
that's the song. You got to get away from the song before I just start busting it out.
Well, so Nineveh. What do we know about Nineveh? It's if we go all the way back. Remember when we talked about Nimrod and how he created at the Tower of Babel? Well, Nimrod also created the city of Nineveh. It's near the Tigris River, the Persian Sea. It was like 4 cities that had been combined together, and there was a river that ran through it under the walls, very similar to like Babylon was. It was 60 miles in circumference, basically the size of London today, 350 square miles, walled. The wall was 100 foot high, 3 chariots wide. That's as wide as a NASCAR track, to give you, and that for 60 miles.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. It had 1,500 towers. The population was somewhere between 600,000 to 1 million. It talks about 600,000 in there. And this was their capital. They were barbaric. They would flay people while they were alive. If they attacked a city, they would cut off heads and make a pyramid out of those heads to be a warning. So that's who he's preaching to.
No wonder he didn't want to go.
And it's real quick, 5 through 10, he preaches to them. And what do?
They repent.
Yeah.
The king tells them to mourn over the evil. They fast, and they repent of their sin.
Yeah, verse 9. Who can tell if God will turn? I mean, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Very seldom. I mean, we've gone through all these prophets, and God's warning, and no one repents except the most gruesome group that we're talking to. Yeah, we turned. Now, it wasn't for long, but they did turn.
Yeah.
And so.
Which then leads to chapter 4, where we get the man who preached it to him with his little fit.
So Jonah preaches the greatest awakening in the Old Testament, and he's displeased.
Yeah. For me, we can learn. For me, it was like Jonah's account we can learn much from, but Jonah himself was not the.
He's the one to learn from, yeah.
Yeah, to learn from, not. I don't know how to say it, but he's not the picture of not his failures, but his shortcomings in really trusting the Lord and being.
Yeah, I mean, he knows God's character. I knew that thou art a gracious God, merciful, slow to anger. You have great kindness. And he knows God's character, and that's why he's upset, because he hates Assyria so bad.
Yeah, and he gets, he's upset that they were saved.
Right. Verse 4, God asks him 2 questions. Doest thou well to be angry? And so he goes out of the city, hoping it's going to be destroyed. He's basically sitting there waiting for the hammer to fall.
And God gives Jonah an object lesson with the
gourd.
With the gourd, who gives him shade, but then he puts a worm in the gourd, so when he awakes, he's sitting there in the baking sun and getting torched.
So the worm comes, destroys it, it withers, and Jonah was overjoyed for the gourd, and he's over more than he is for 600,000 to 1,000,000 souls to turn to the Lord.
And then he gets upset about that too.
Yeah.
And God explains it. You get upset over something that you had nothing to do with.
Doest thou well to be angry for the gourd?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You did not plant this tree. You did not plant this thing. Like, same thing with Nineveh. You had, like, how could God destroy the city when hundreds of thousands of people are getting saved?
So God points out the coldness of Jonah's heart, and we don't get Jonah's response.
Nope, it ends there.
So who wrote Jonah?
I don't know.
That's the question. If it was Jonah, we got our response.
Yeah. That's true.
If not, we don't know who wrote it. But if it was Jonah, then we got our response to that question. And he finally got it, which is cool. So
Jonah wanted God to perform his miracles and answer his prayers in the way he thought they should be answered, and how he thought, because he was a well-known, just doing what the Lord was saying, bringing good news. But like you said, he got caught up in that, and that's a dangerous game. And you can see how the path that took him. And like you said, if it was written by him, he did finally get it.
Yeah, I mean, you can see this in your life sometimes. I can look back at times where I thought something was supposed to go one way and it went the other way, and God has used that in a great way, and I was upset. And it's not about you, Keith. It's not about. So let's keep our hand open to the Lord and let Him make the decisions. All right.
Wednesday.
Micah.
We got Micah. So we meet Micah. He prophesied during Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah.
Yep, clearly says there. He's from Morashite. Morashite, I guess. It's a lot of consonants there in a row. It's about 25 miles southwest of Jerusalem. So he's a very similar prophet to Amos. He was probably not... He wasn't in the main city. We don't know if he was a farmer, but he wasn't in the main city. He prophesies to both the north and the south, so the north has not been taken by Assyria yet. But he's warning of both of them. And he tells them judgment's coming. And you'll see he uses, instead of saying Israel and Judah most of the time, he usually says Jerusalem and Samaria. So he's usually talking to the capitals, which is a representation of that.
So do you think some of his prophecies and stuff sparked some of the reforms in Hezekiah?
I don't know.
Because Hezekiah was a good king.
It could have. So he was born, he's going to be born during some of that time. So maybe. It's a very interesting chapter. There's all kinds of names of cities listed in from 6 through 16, and 10 through 15. And now, like I said, I'm not a Hebrew guy. I have to take the word of other folks, but he's playing off the words. So you're like, why this random city is he talking about this? So in verse 10, he talks about Afra. That Hebrew word is similar for dust. And he says they're going to roll in the dust. Verse 11, Saphir means beautiful. He says, not for long. You're not going to be beautiful for long. Verse 11, Zaanan means exit or go out. And he says, you won't be able to leave. So he does this each of those times. So you're wondering what these random cities are. It's not so much to list those cities as it is to, here is the type of destruction that's going to come, and I'm playing off the words of that, which is cool.
And people of that time would know that.
Yeah, they would know that, and in the English it doesn't stick out to us as much, but that's what's going on there.
Yeah.
So Micah 2.
We get another list of their sins: covetousness, pride, rejecting God's word, embracing false prophets and God. It's just it's a chapter of...
They weren't listening, so God restricts their prophets.
Yeah.
They were even blaming God for their problems. And
that's a dangerous game.
Yeah, so they went to their pagan prophets, and then it ends with a promise of a remnant and a restoration. We good?
Yep.
All right. Micah 3. Reprimand to their leaders and their spiritual leaders.
Look at verse 8. Verse 8 is interesting. It says, but truly I am full of power by the Spirit of the Lord, and of judgment and of might, to declare unto Jacob his transgression, and to Israel his sin. The confidence that Micah had in his calling. We didn't get much in chapter 1 of who he was and about his calling and stuff, but this shed some light on who he was and his faith in the Lord, and how confident he was, even though what he was saying was not very...
Yeah, he's telling them they abhorred God's word, and then he just flat lets them have it. He says, you're going to be plowed like a field. I mean, have a good day.
Yeah, be here all week.
Yeah. All right. And then we get to chapter 4. This chapter is incredible. If you want prophecy of end times, highlight, circle chapter 4. In the last days, but in the last days it shall come to pass, and then it just goes on. It's a very detailed chapter of what Christ's kingdom will be when the Lord returns his second time. Israel's place, Christ's rule over the world, foretelling of... It tells, there's verses 9 through 10 does go in telling of some of their pain they're going to have in Babylon. But the great strength of Christ's rule and his kingdom. I mean, the whole chapter, except for 9 and 10, are about the Lord's final kingdom. All right?
Yeah. Chapter 5 then goes into...
Yeah.
It's another cool chapter. Very good chapter.
Yeah.
To see the prophecy of where Jesus will be born.
Yeah, his first birth. Go ahead.
Where he'll be born. It talks about being in Bethlehem.
Yeah, so they'll be taken, but... out of Bethlehem will come a ruler, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting. So we see this isn't just a normal person. This is God himself from everlasting. And this is his first coming. But he is the one that from old, everlasting. He is always existing. And then in verses 3 through 5, there's a twofold thing here. Talks about Babylon, the Babylonian time where they will be brought back, but he will give them up until the time they will be brought back to him in his return as well. So this is talking both his birth, and then his return as well. So there's a mixture of some other things about Assyria in there for 5 and 6, and then the triumph of the remnant of Jacob. All right.
Chapter 6. I have something in chapter 6.
Oh, okay, go for it.
So we have like a courtroom scene going, and God against his people, and he tells them why he's upset with them. After all he's done and shown them, after all the second chances, they still did not seek him. They still have their back turned toward him. And the people answer and ask him what they can do. And he answers in verses 8, He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God, with thy God.
Thy God, yeah.
So God is stopping in the courtroom scene or whatever, stopping what can we do? And he's saying, I have shown you.
Yeah.
He has shown you.
Yeah, through the whole first 5 verses, what have I done? What have I done? And he recaps all this kindness and love, and they're doing that. And then verse 8,
It is not a mystery. It has not been a mystery. It has never been a mystery from the dawn of them being Israelites. It has been there, and yet they still, over and over, and we know that. And he tells them that to see the rod of judgment, and
the result of unfruitful activity and judgments coming upon them. And he blames it, interesting, for the statutes of Omri are kept in all the works of the house of Ahab, and you walk in their counsels.
Yeah, the Omride.
Yeah, so we have all the way back to the pagan things of Omri that were brought into both houses, both Israel and Jacob.
Yeah. Which was the most evil.
Yes, right.
Evil king.
Correct.
Dynasty
in Israel. Yes.
But it seeped in because of.
All right, Micah 7.
So when do you think this chapter took place?
Oh, I don't know.
Where the people humble themselves and get right with the Lord. I think this was like when Hezekiah came in, based off of what it was.
Yeah,
like,
this is the prophet, very similar. There was another prophet that did this as well, where in the last chapter, he's woe is me, and sort of this confession for the entire group. So it's a confession of their sins. He's basically making intercession for Israel. Description of, then he goes into this vivid description of God's forgiveness and grace and mercy towards his people. It might have been during Hezekiah. I did not think about. I didn't even think about the time of this. He talks about God's faithfulness to his covenants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because before that, they had evil kings, like coward kings, and so I don't know.
Very true. That might be. I'd have to look into that. But we see him taking the place, stepping in for the people. So that's what's going on in that chapter. All right, we are in Nahum.
Micah, Nahum.
All right. The Lord is the name of this.
Do you have to do that? If you say, like, where's Habakkuk? You don't just know the one before and after. You got to do.
I don't have a song. I wish I had a song.
But you like go through the list. It's like where.
Yeah, like sure. Yeah, you go through the minor prophets for sure.
What's after the letter M or whatever? Yeah.
JK, that reminds me. There was a song. Oh, never mind. I'm not telling that story. It's too nerdy. All right.
After all we've talked about, it's too nerdy.
That one's actually more nerdy than that. So who's Nahum?
So we're into Thursday now.
Yeah, Nahum prophesied probably over a century after. Some people think as much as 150 years after Jonah, and he is prophesying.
After?
Yes. You have before?
That's what I read. Yeah.
I had that he prophesied after.
Oh, sorry, I read this wrong. I have 100 or so years earlier. We saw Jonah prophesy.
Yes, okay. After Jonah. So
after Jonah.
So he's talking to Assyria again, after they've already taken Israel.
Yeah.
And for their sin. Now he prophesies from Judah. So he's in Judah of Assyria's demise. So Yes, they turned during Jonah, but since that time, you've got 3 generations now. They've turned back.
They've abandoned those beliefs.
They've abandoned that, and they took all what's coming with Israel and all that, and now it's going to be the demise of their empire to Babylon, and God will now use Babylon in Judah. Yeah. So this chapter tells us, pretty interesting, it tells us a lot of characteristics of God. It says he revengeth, he's slow to anger, he has his way, he's good, he is a stronghold to them that trust in him, he will not acquit the wicked. So Nahum this is who God is. These are characteristics of God, and he's assuring the Assyrians, Syria's affliction on others it's done.
Yeah.
So God gave them Jonah. They followed for a while, and now they're back after their false gods. So he's now. So we got one prophet that prophesied to Edom. Now we got 2 prophets that have prophesied up to Assyria.
Yeah.
And we get to Nahum 2.
Yeah. Talks about how Babylon will wipe them off the face of the earth.
Yeah. So Nineveh's fall here. They're going to be led away captive. It talks in verse 6, the river ran through the city. Interesting how its gates it talks about. This reminds me of Belshazzar when the Medes and the Persians attack Babylon, how they went under the walls too. It's
the river and
very
everything.
similar situation. In verse 13, God says, "Behold, I am against thee." Yeah. Never good.
Nah, you don't want that.
Ezekiel, he said that. God said that to Egypt, Gog and Magog. So, not good company. So, I am against thee. And that's that chapter.
Yeah. So, chapter 3 is the chapter that I was talking about where you see a little glimpse of how nasty and how bad the city was. Mm-hmm. So, for me, I think we've said this before, but I'd take myself to one of those scenes that we have in Marvel or Star Wars where they go to one of those planets. The main character goes to one of the planets that is like scared, like people are scared of going to. Don't go there. That's the outlaws, And like they come in and it's all crime and nastiness and all that. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. And that's what I imagine here, because they don't bury their dead. They're filthy, and just pure wickedness is in the city. And I like how Guzik laid out the rest of the chapter of how because of the way God judged other nations, because of their wickedness and weakness of leaders, they are ripe for judgment.
Yeah.
And
yeah. In verse 19 it says the people will clap when they hear what's happened to them.
So that's a picture of who Nineveh and what Nineveh was all about. Yeah.
They're gone.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so we're into Friday now, and we got Habakkuk.
Habakkuk?
And Zephaniah.
Habakkuk? I don't know. I always said Habakkuk.
Really?
Habakkuk. I don't know what I say now.
Depending on where you're at, who you're talking to. Habakkuk. Habakkuk. Very intriguing chapter here. So Habakkuk was the last prophet in the southern kingdom, but was still well before the nation was taken. So again, he was the last one, and then there was a period of time where it was like we were talking about, where God did not send a message.
Yeah. He's during King Josiah's descendants, basically.
The end of
King Jehoiakim. And chapter 1, Babylon's coming.
But he does something that no other prophet really does, in a way. He questions God. He asks God, why do you wait?
Oh, yeah. There's this back and forth in the first 2 chapters. Yeah.
He asks God, why do you wait? Why are we allowing the Israelites to continue in their sin? You have showed me so much sin. You've shown me the evil, the wickedness that these people are doing. Why are you waiting?
Yeah, because so he would have been like a kid or a teenager during King Josiah's revival. So he would have, he'd seen. Now he's seeing the opposite. He just sees how they've just plunged into the sin. So he cries out to that. And the Lord responds, telling him how Babylon's
really
going to come and destroy them in
yeah.
judgment. And
Well, he's like, look at the nations moving. See the tides changing from Assyria to Babylon. And that is why.
and then he asks, though, in 12 through 17, how God are you going to use a wicked nation to come after us? How the good and the real question, I think, is how are the good and the bad going to be judged in Israel? I can understand just the bad, but okay, so God sends somebody to judge the United States. All right, we're pre-Jesus, we're in Old Testament times, and he's sending some country to judge America, and we're like, well, there's a lot of good people here too. Why would you judge the good people and the bad together? And that's the end of chapter 1.
Yeah, he doesn't give an answer until chapter 2. But for me, I thought it was really cool when he said, look at the tide, like the Babylon, the shift of things. Like, look at that, and that is why. My plan, I am so far ahead of you. You know? Like, I've been working over here, and now, like, he gives a glimpse into the plan of God. And
we're amazed right now at what Israel just did against Hezbollah. They said that was 15 years in the making.
Yeah, and
God sees all. I mean, he's so this is
like
we're not in the realm.
We have no idea. Yeah. So
we're not in the dimensions.
He just gives. He like opens the curtain a little bit. Okay, this is what's happening. You have no idea.
Sort of a Job situation at the end where he's like, "Where were you?" So he waits for God's reply in chapter 2, verse 1.
He was staying in his post.
Yeah. And he tells him, verse 2 and 3, write this down. And he says, people who read this are going to run. And talks about how God's dealing with the proud. And then he goes through 4 woes in 9 through 19. Woe to the greedy, woe to the violent, woe to the drunk, woe to the idolaters.
Yeah. So the first 2 chapters were question and answer type of thing. Now Habakkuk is praying. He's praying for revival. He knew how God...
so this, I was ahead. So what Habakkuk does is what Nahum did as well. Nahum had prayed. Now we see Habakkuk doing it. Okay.
Because he knew how God once worked. Prayed, like you said, he was probably a kid when he was a kid when Josiah. So, and he prayed he would do it again. That he does a masterful description of the power of God for his people. But the main thing that stuck out to me were the last few verses when he says, even though all of this stuff is going to die and stop producing fruit, even though everything I know and love is of little significance, he still trusts and finds joy and rejoices in God. Yeah.
So we see a turn from chapter 1.
Yeah.
In chapter 1, he's concerned, how God are you going to do this with the good and the bad? How are you going to destroy both of us? And then at the end of it, we see, I know you, God, and I can trust you in crisis. You're going to do what's right. You're going to do however I trust in your strength. I trust in your power in my life. And so that's the good big turning point there. In just 3 chapters, we see this turning point in this man as he's dealing with this. All right.
And then the last, to the chief singer on my stringed instruments. Was that chapter a song?
Oh, there you go. Oh, it was, yep.
Interesting.
I wonder how that goes.
We've already been down that road. So Zephaniah.
It's a toe tapper.
This is still the same day here. So Zephaniah was actually a prophet for a good king here. He was during the time of Josiah. And he was actually from a royal lineage. Yeah. From Hezekiah's lineage.
But he grew up during the time of Manasseh, so he would have seen the good and the bad.
Yeah, for sure.
The bad and the good. So he prophesies in Judah during the early reign of Josiah. So go ahead.
So Zephaniah prophesied about the coming judgment day and that these sins needed to be dealt with before it was too late. Tells everybody that there are judgment is promised to everybody. And then he goes into the intensity of that judgment.
Yeah, we know he probably was during the early days, if you're into the history of this, probably the early days of King Josiah, because he prophesies later about the fall of Nineveh. So Babylon has not taken Nineveh yet, and that happened midway through Josiah's reign. So we know thereabouts where he's prophesying. Just a couple things on this. Miktesh in verse 11, just wondering what that is. It's an area where they had bazaars and stuff like that were located. Malcolm in verse 5, I didn't do those in order. That's Molech, the idol Molech, where they sacrificed children to the idol.
Fire.
So just if you're wondering what those were. Chapter 2.
Repent while there's still time.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, before this happens, repent. Yeah.
And then the same nations that we've seen judgment on before, they're described with those different...
Yeah, and he's showing here the judgment coming against the surrounding nations. I'm hoping you're going to learn from that is basically what he's... And then he talks about the fall of Assyria. What do I have here? Oh, it had to open their eyes is basically.
Yeah.
Or...
You see it happening.
They either thought he was crazy as a prophet, or it had to have opened their eyes to say, "What? You think Nineveh is going to fall? The ones that just conquered our brothers up north, that type of thing."
Yeah.
All right.
Chapter 3, you kind of get the description of this wicked and unjust city of Jerusalem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's contrasted against the righteousness of their God and how they were without excuse.
Yeah, verse 5: the unjust knoweth no shame. I've sent judgment on the nations. This was from chapter 2. I was saying this before. I've sent all these judgments on the nations, yet you didn't listen. You didn't heed the warning. Surely thou wilt fear, he says in verse 7. But they didn't. Therefore, judgment's coming.
But one day the Messiah will come. There will be a reason for singing.
Yeah. I bring you. I gather you, he says.
Yeah.
He will restore. Yep. Good deal.
Zephaniah.
Zephaniah 3. All right.
Is that how the song went?
Yeah.
All right. So now we have one of probably my favorite one.
Really?
I did. So all of these prophets were taught on last summer with different teachers, different Sunday school teachers, different deacons.
Yeah, in the during our Wednesday night service. Yeah.
So mine was Haggai.
Oh, okay.
And if you look at my Bible here, there were a lot of notes.
Okay. Good.
So I would also, if you have time, go back to those lessons. We are, obviously, we say this every time, but we're flying through these. We've done 9 books today. We're doing 9 books. There's more in those lessons, so a little plug to the messages.
Oh, no, they did a great job on that. Yeah.
So
they're all on the website. You can look.
Mine was on Haggai, and that is how you say it. Haggai.
Haggai. All right.
Haggai. It's Haggai.
All right. Well, tell us who he is first.
So Haggai. I gotta read my stuff real quick. Go ahead.
So the prophets up to this point, there were 9 prophets that are before the exile. We just mentioned the last one there in Zephaniah. Now we have the next 3 prophets are prophets post-exile. So they've gone to Babylon, Syria, they've gone to Babylon, 70 years has passed, and now there's a group coming back. And yes, God sent prophets to them as well. And there's a situation. So we see here...
Second year of Darius.
Yeah, so 538, the decree comes from Cyrus. There's 2 years of construction under Zerubbabel on the temple. There's a 2-year stoppage. 14 years of neglect. Now we're up to 520 BC. and it starts to resume, and within 4 years, the temple's built. So I can call this chapter "Consider Your Ways" because he says it 2 times in that chapter.
Yep.
Take it away.
Verse 4, 5, and 7 here. And you see the verse 4, you see what they were doing when they were neglecting.
Yeah, what's the situation here?
Is it time for you, O ye, to dwell in your sealed houses, and this house lie waste? So their houses, their own personal houses, were grand. They were sealed, as in they were very nice houses. Nice roof, like all that stuff. Very nice houses, but the house of the Lord is sitting there.
Yeah, they were sent to build the temple.
But they changed it to a prideful, selfish thing. And this is
Quickly, yeah.
This is the heart of the people. And then he says, consider your ways. Consider what you're doing. And you drink, your clothes, like everything is great for you. But you have neglected the Lord that gave you this opportunity to come back.
He starts to tell them, he starts to show them how God's hands isn't on them too. You know, you work, you're not getting much out of it. You plant, you're not getting full crops. Those types of things.
Another thing I saw when studying this was in verses 12 and 14, you see it start with the leaders.
Yeah.
And then it goes down to the next leader, then to the next leader, and then to the people. And it says Zerubbabel, then Joshua, then Josedek, the high priest, they obeyed, and then the people obeyed. And I just thought that was interesting. So
yeah, so they have humble hearts. This is a very encouraging book because they're presented with, hey guys, you're on this same road, all right? Hey guys, yeah, very good. That was not done on purpose. And so they get there. What? Just start.
No, keep going.
All right. So they turn and they start to work on the temple again. So it starts.
Yeah, and then chapter 2, verse 3, who was left among you that saw this house in her first glory? And how do you see it now? Is it not in your eyes in comparison of it as nothing? So there were people that had seen the temple before.
Some really old guys.
Yeah, really old, but they had seen. And so the temple that Solomon built, okay, right?
Yeah, was grander.
They had, like we talked about with the Lebanon tree, like they had the best of the best come and build this thing.
Yeah.
Here,
they're at their
you do not.
Yeah.
You do not see that grandeur. Like they're building it, but it is not to that scale. So he is asking, like.
Yeah, 3 times he says, "Be strong. God will do something in this temple far greater."
Yeah.
And he's talking about the bringing of Christ.
Yeah.
The desire of all nations. So
even though it didn't look as cool as the first one or as grand, the Lord promises to do more.
And he goes in this whole thing about questioning the priests. You know, is this clean? Is this unclean?
Yeah.
And the whole thing, I like this quote, holiness is not contagious, impurity is. So he's trying to let them see that you need to be clean. And when God's going to bless that, he talks about God's rule over the nations. And then he ends the chapter by assuring Zerubbabel, he says, I have chosen thee. So he is the legitimate lineage of King David in this situation, which will then play off into the next things.
Yeah. So that guy comes in and says, why are you not building? Go build.
Yeah.
Consider your ways. Go build. Why are you there? Go and do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you get into Zechariah, which is Sunday, and it's kind of the same thing. Yeah. Right? But it focuses.
I said play off of that. This is something in Zechariah. They so closely go with each other. There's a lot of prophecy in this one, like way out there type prophecy as we get in Zechariah. His name means the Lord remembers. He's probably based on that date in 1 through 6. He starts 2 months after Haggai started.
Yeah, but he focuses more on the heart, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Turn ye unto me.
So
they were starting to go down this wrong path. And he sees this vision of these horsemen on red and speckled and white horses going through the earth. Sort of these angels, this spirit realm of the angels going to and fro through the earth, watching over it. And in verses 11 through 17, the angel of the Lord, Jesus Christ, pre-incarnate, intercedes for Jerusalem and Judah. And he talks about 4 horns that scattered Israel, these 4 nations that had scattered Israel and Judah, did or will do. And that was a question I had. When you were reading this, it talks about those 4 horns. Did you see that as 4 horns that had already done this?
yeah, I did.
Or did you see that as had and will do? Like if it's talking about the 4 from Daniel, only 2 of them had risen so far. Greece and Rome had not. But if it's talking about 4 other nations, maybe it's talking about Assyria, the Medes and the Persians, Babylon. I don't know. But he tells them that he will fray them, meaning those nations, empires will be taken care of, is basically what he says. So, I think the gist of it is the same, though. Everybody, you get what it's talking about there.
Yeah.
Chapter 2, the wall of fire. He sends this man. He's measuring the walls, and God will protect Jerusalem like a ring of fire around it. Partial and full future fulfillment spoken about there. God promises to protect, and his presence will be with them. That's chapter 2.
Yeah. Chapter 3, you get a vision of the high priest, and then it goes into like God's branch of the fig tree under the vine, all that type of that whole thing. It's a shorter chapter, but
chapter 3.
Yeah.
Chapter 3 is very interesting. It's almost like we're in the throne room of God again. The high priest Joshua is standing before God. Well, a priest represents the people before God. So he's standing before God. He's standing before the angel of the Lord, Jesus, and Satan comes accusing him because it says Joshua's clothes, he had filthy garments on. So Satan comes accusing Joshua to the Lord, and the Lord rebukes Satan and had Joshua's garments changed in front of Jesus Christ. And he says Jerusalem's place is a brand. They are a brand plucked out of the fire. And Jesus speaks to Joshua in verses 6 and 7. He says, "Follow, and you shall have place and position." So he's setting up Joshua to be this high priest. And then in verses 8 through 10, he talks about the Messiah and his reign, the branch, the same branch, capital letters of Isaiah 4 and Jeremiah 23. The branch, and then he talks, another comparison he uses of a stone with 7 eyes. The 7 eyes represents knowledge and perfection with an engraved identification. So this is what he's talking. This is talking about the Lord. And it brings prosperity and peace, and goes on from there. Okay. Chapter 4.
Chapter 4. This is
Candlestick.
Yeah, the candlestick, and some encouragement to Zerubbabel, right?
Yeah. So he's setting up the leaders. So he sets up the high priest, and now he's setting up the king. Yeah.
Yeah, and Zerubbabel gets this. Well, there's this vision, and how Zerubbabel will accomplish it, and it is explained to him that, like, basically, he will set him up, and he will use his hands to finish the work, right?
Yeah, my spirit will be on there. Yeah, so there's this candlestick with 7 lamps on it with 2 olive trees, one on each side of it. The candlestick represents the word of the Lord unto Zerubbabel. He says, not by might, but by my spirit. The Holy Spirit will help him. And like you said, the encouragement that Zerubbabel will finish the work. And the olive trees, it tells you what each of them, I love, sometimes there's this symbolic thing, and you don't know what it's talking about. And he says, well, here's what this means, right in the same chapter. The olive trees are the two anointed ones. The two anointed ones were Zerubbabel and Joshua.
Yeah.
So, there's many times there's two anointed ones, Moses and Aaron, Paul and Barnabas, those types of, how God uses those folks. So that's chapter 4.
Chapter 5. Then I turned and lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a flying roll.
Were you thinking of buttery roll?
It's a scroll, right?
Yes.
And so he's asked, what does he see? And
it's big too.
Yeah, and 20 cubits in the breadth, 10 cubits. So it's big.
15 by 30 feet. Yeah, the size, this is, I don't know why someone came up with this, but it's the size of the porch on Solomon's temple. I don't think that was there for a reason, but maybe it was. I think somebody just finding some comparison there. But, and he says, all who were thieves or liars, those that had perjured themselves, they're cut off the list. And that's what it's talking about there.
Yeah.
And then I busted in. Go ahead if you got something there.
Not good.
No, verses 5 through 8. Then it talks about a woman, ephah and lead. Ephah and lead, those are both measurements of weight, and associated with wickedness. So the word, once again, we've got a Hebrew thing. Wickedness is a feminine word. We don't have that in English. In Spanish, French, all of those, you have la and la, that type, or L, and where a word is considered feminine or masculine. And that's what we see here. Wickedness is a feminine word in Hebrew, and they're dealing here with greed and materialism and dishonest profit, and God is casting it down. And he's saying basically, this is going to be returned to the place where it came from, which is Shinar or Babylon, or in Babylon. It started there, and I'm sending it back. So he talks about this imagery of these two women with wings and being sent back with this weight of lead back to her own base, this imagery of an idol on its stand. These two winged women are not angels, all right? People like to attribute this to angels. If you've ever done a study on angels, there aren't women angels. I mean, there's no reference to that at all. This is imagery of wickedness. So this is not talking about a woman angel. This is just the imagery of sending it back to where it came from. I don't know if that makes any sense, but chapter 6. 4 chariots.
The 4 chariots. So you have the red, black, white, and dappled. So are these? I saw that some people were comparing this to the world empires in Daniel 2 and 7.
Some compare it to Revelation.
Yeah, because they're the same colors. So
all we know, we don't know. All we know is the 4 chariots are sent of God to traveling the earth, and that was their purpose. In verses 9 through 11, he makes a crown for Joshua. The question then is, he's the high priest. Why a crown for a high priest? So now we start this picture of the kingly priest, and who is both priest and king, the Messiah.
Yeah.
And so that's what he's talking about here. And he says, "Behold the man, the branch. He shall build the temple." So this is a spiritual reference there to Jesus Christ. And the crown was not meant to be worn by Joshua. It's just a memorial as we're setting up this eventual rise of the Messiah, the priest and king. I'm sorry, folks. My brain is mush at this point. I'm trying to make sense of my own notes. I hope that helped. I just thought through what I just said, and so that didn't make a lot of sense. So then chapter 7. I titled this one, Should I Weep?
Yeah. It's confronting the sin of religious hypocrisy is what I had. And, yeah. Hypocrisy in fasting is rebuked.
This is a pretty cool chapter, though. So there's this group of people that come in. It is the anniversary of the day Jerusalem fell. So for 70 years, they had been memorializing this in the temple or in their synagogue with fasting and weeping. That's a noble thing. But now they're back in Jerusalem and they're building the temple. And they come and they say, should I weep, basically? They're wondering, should we continue this process? Now, this is, of all the chapters we read, this one really sort of sinks in with where we are. In verse 4 through 7, then God asks them, are you doing this for me? Or are you doing this for you? So the thought here is religious activity just to be doing something. That's pretty powerful because that's everywhere.
Yeah. Do you do it just to do it?
That could be in Friendship Baptist Church. That could be at the most high church type where we consider the liturgy that's very very elaborate, where they're reading everything that's ever been written and versus anything speaking directly. Here we have Jesus or God asking the religious activity, are you doing it for me or are you doing it for you? And if it's just religious activity, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
I'd rather you to focus on obedience than doing all this. So, God tells them in verses 8 through 10 what he wants them to do. I asked for obedience. They didn't listen before. I sent judgment for their disobedience. Listen to me now, is basically what he's saying. That one hit me. As we were studying, we're getting through all these chapters this week, and I was like, wow, this is a lot of books. And I finally hit that last chapter, and I was like, oh, that one hits home. That really speaks. Because there's a lot of things we can do in our services, and they can be, if you're doing it to the Lord, for the Lord, versus for you, great. But if you're doing it for you, just because this is what I do, why? You're wasting your time, and you're not doing it for the right reason. So next week we get into the New Testament, right?
In our 40th week.
Yeah,
yes.
It only took 40 weeks, but hey, we're there. So that's awesome. Hey, bring us home. You got a good joke?
How can you tell if an ant is a girl?
How?
They're all girls. Otherwise, they'd be uncles. That is from my aunt, Terry. So.
All right. You guys have a great week. Hope you get into this. And looking forward to getting into the New Testament. That'll be cool, too. So enjoy this week. Get through all these different books. And we'll see you next week. Love you guys. Bye.